Welcome to this Forage College Explainer. So, picture this. You're sitting right there in mission control. The countdown clock is literally ticking down. You're the flight director for a massive Solana mainnet launch. You've got teams buzzing in your ear, telemetry scrolling past, and you're just staring down that big, intimidating deploy button, probably sweating right through your favorite hoodie, right? You don't just want to feel ready to launch, you need to know you are. So today, in this lesson titled Synthesizing Readiness, Final Pre-Deployment Review, we're going to master exactly that, turning all that pre-launch anxiety into an airtight, totally defensible go or no-go judgment.
Okay, so let's dive into this by bridging the gap from our last lesson, which, if you remember, was all about identifying and mitigating risk management items. We spent a ton of time finding risks, fixing them, and generating those debug reports. But here's the thing. Having a giant pile of isolated fixes and a risk register, that's not a decision. It's just a pile of data. So how do we actually synthesize all of that into an ultimate go or no-go recommendation? Well, we have to completely shift our focus from fixing individual bugs to assembling a really coherent, evidence-backed narrative. And that brings us to our game plan for today. 1. Gathering artifacts. 2. Calculating the readiness score. 3. Diving into the 5-step workflow. 4. Creating the readiness note. And 5. Making that final go, no-go decision. Let's get to it. Section 1. Gathering artifacts. So let's start with our first vector, bringing together all of our pre-flight diagnostics. Just like a rocket scientist checking engine pressures, we've got to gather our raw inputs. We need the current status of absolutely every single item on our pre-deploy checklist, plus our risk register with all those updated mitigation logs. And crucially, we need our latest debug report. Think of this as our live telemetry, automated test snapshots, RPC latency metrics, and those all-important smoke test results. Listen, if you don't have these 3 inputs bundled together, you aren't ready to evaluate anything. You're just kind of guessing, and we definitely don't guess on mainnet.
Section 2. Calculating the readiness score.
Now, this is where it gets fun. This is where we completely eliminate that fuzzy, I think we're ready feeling, and replace it with cold, hard math. We use what's called a readiness aggregator. Usually, this is just a small TypeScript script running in Node.js. What it does is read our checklist, the risk register, and the debug report, and then it objectively scores our artifacts. And here is a massive pro tip for you. Make sure this script is entirely file system based. It should make 0 live network calls. Why? Because we need this process to be 100% reproducible, auditable, and safe to run locally. The absolute last thing you want is some random API timeout ruining your entire launch sequence. So the really crucial point here is how this aggregator handles danger. The script applies a massive 20-point penalty for every single unresolved high-severity risk it finds in your register. I mean, that is a heavy, heavy tax. It's a super simple heuristic, but it guarantees that an unresolved high-risk issue will just severely cripple your overall score. It makes it mathematically impossible to accidentally authorize a dangerous deployment. On the flip side of that, the magic number for launch is 80. To get an immediate, unrestricted go recommendation from the aggregator, you need a minimum score of 80 out of 100, and this part is completely non-negotiable, 0 unresolved high risks. This weighted scoring system is brilliant because it means you can prioritize deploy blocking items by literally giving them more weight in the calculation. But, what happens if you aren't perfectly flawless? Because, let's be real, we rarely are. If you score 80 or above, you're a go. Awesome. But if you fall below 80, yet you manage to hit at least a 60, you don't necessarily have to abort the whole mission entirely. Instead, you enter the conditional deploy path. A conditional deploy means you can proceed, but only with a staged rollout that is strictly gated by demonstrable remediation steps. Now, anything below a 60, yeah, that's a hard no-go. Go grab some coffee and get back to debugging, my friend.
Section 3. The 5-step workflow. Let's look at how this builds into our standardized process, because honestly, deployments are as much a social process as they are a technical one. This reproducible 5-step workflow ensures your decision is completely transparent when the pressure is on. First, collect your versioned artifact bundle. Second, correlate by mapping your checklist items directly to your evidence. Third, score it using that aggregator script we just talked about. Fourth, decide on a binary go, no-go, or conditional path. And fifth, hand off the structured readiness note to your release manager.
Moving right along to Section 4, the readiness note. This brings us to the actual piece of digital paper you hand over to the release manager. The readiness note is a true decision-grade blueprint. We're not talking about a 50-page thesis here. It is exactly 1 page. It summarizes the checklist score, the top reasons preventing an immediate go, and links to your time-stamped attachments. Basically, any operational reviewer should be able to open it up and completely reproduce your conclusion in under 5 minutes. Right in the core of this note, every single key finding is strictly correlated to a specific piece of evidence, which leaves absolutely zero ambiguity. Take a look at this. We can see the program build verification passed, pointing directly to the build log. But look at the RPC latency. It's marked partial and points to a 24-hour CSV file. And our smoke tests straight up failed, pointing right to the debug report. There's literally nowhere to hide here, no matter how much you might want to ignore those red error messages. The data tells the exact, unfiltered story of our application's health.
And finally, Section 5, the go/no-go decision.
Let's look at how we parse this output to make our ultimate call. Take this real-world scenario. Say we ran the aggregator and got a 78. Ouch. We are agonizingly close to that 80-point threshold for a pure go, but we just fell short. Why? Well, that smoke test failure we just saw, combined with some nasty 420 millisecond RPC latency spikes, dragged our overall score down. So because we hit 78, we are securely in conditional deploy territory. We aren't aborting, but we certainly aren't flying freely either. So the big question is, how do we move from conditional to a full go? We have to define explicit, testable, conditional acceptance criteria. We can't just wave our hands and say, make sure it looks okay. We need hard metrics. For our example here, we require the Canary smoke tests to pass for 2 consecutive 30-minute windows. We demand that our 95th percentile RPC latency drops to 300 milliseconds or less for 3 10-minute windows. And we need an error-free end-to-end execution at our intended throughput. We assign strict owners to each criteria and set a firm time window. If they meet the criteria, boom, the note gets updated to go. If they fail, it's a no-go, and we roll it all back.
As we start to wrap this up, I really want you to remember this mental model. Think of readiness not just as checking boxes on a list, but as 3 coordinated vectors. Vector 1 is checklist completeness, literally the quantity of checks you've passed. Vector 2 is unresolved risk severity, which is your qualitative exposure to danger. And Vector 3 is recent monitoring health, verifying how your app actually behaves under real load. Your deployment is only safe when these 3 vectors perfectly align. When they start to diverge, that's exactly when you must lean on conditional steps and staged rollouts to limit the blast radius. So I want you to ask yourself before you hit that deploy button, are your deployment vectors perfectly aligned, or are you flying blind on your next mainnet launch? Take these lessons, prepare your artifact bundle, and get ready for the next stage in this module where we're going to tackle the actual deployment strategy. Keep striving for that perfect score, and hey, remember to visit forge.college to master even more Web3 engineering fundamentals and explore all the resources we've got waiting for you. Thanks for joining this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.